The autumn leaves swirled outside the windows of Riverside High School as Maya Chen clutched her class schedule with trembling fingers. It was her first Monday at yet another new school, the fourth one in 3 years. Her father's job with the military had taken their family from base to base, and each move felt like starting over in a foreign country, even when they never left the United States. Maya pressed her back against the cold metal of her locker, watching the river of students flow past her in the hallway. Their voices blended into an overwhelming symphony of teenage chatter, punctuated by the slam of locker doors and the squeak of sneakers on polished linoleum. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird, desperate to escape. She had always been anxious, but the constant moving had made it worse. Just when she would start to feel comfortable somewhere, just when she might begin to make a friend or find her place, it was time to pack up and leave again. The anxiety had become her constant companion, a weight in her chest that made every new interaction feel like climbing a mountain. Maya pulled out her phone and checked the time. 5 minutes until first period. She took a deep breath, the way her therapist had taught her, counting to 4 as she inhaled, and to 6 as she exhaled. It helped, but only a little. The butterflies in her stomach still felt more like angry wasps. As she navigated the crowded hallway toward her English class, Maya tried to make herself as small as possible. She had learned that invisibility was often the safest strategy in a new place. Keep your head down, don't make eye contact, don't draw attention to yourself. At least not until you figured out the social landscape, who was safe and who wasn't. But invisibility was hard to maintain when you were clearly the new girl. Maya's backpack was too new, her clothes too carefully chosen, her uncertainty too obvious. She might as well have worn a sign that said, "I don't belong here." It was in second period biology that she first encountered them. Maya had chosen a seat in the middle of the classroom, not too eager in the front row, not too rebellious in the back. She was arranging her notebook and pens with meticulous care when she heard the voice behind her. "Oh look, we have a new victim," the voice said. Loud enough for several students to hear, but quiet enough that the teacher, busy writing on the whiteboard, didn't notice. Maya's shoulders tensed. She didn't turn around, but she could feel eyes on her, studying her like she was a specimen under a microscope. "I bet she's one of those quiet, weird types," another voice chimed in. "Look at how she's organizing her stuff. Like anyone cares about color-coordinated pens." Maya's face burned with embarrassment. She had always been organized, had always found comfort in having everything in its proper place. It was one of the ways she managed her anxiety, creating order in small things when the bigger world felt chaotic. The first voice belonged to Chloe Morrison, though Maya wouldn't learn her name until later. Chloe was one of those students who seemed to take up more space than her physical form should allow. She was tall and confident, with perfectly styled blonde hair and the kind of clothes that announced she came from money. More importantly, she had the social power that came from being at the top of the high school hierarchy. Her second in command was Jessica Walsh, a girl who seemed to exist solely to amplify whatever Chloe said. Where Chloe was calculating in her cruelty, Jessica was enthusiastic about it, like a puppy eager to please its master. "Maybe she's homeschooled," Jessica whispered loudly. "That would explain why she doesn't know how to dress like a normal person." Maya touched her sweater self-consciously. She had picked it because it was soft and comforting, not because it was particularly fashionable. Her mother had always told her to dress for comfort rather than style, but now she wondered if that had been bad advice. Mr. Patterson began the lesson, and Maya tried to focus on his words about cellular biology, but she could feel the weight of judgment pressing down on her shoulders. Every time she reached for her pen or turned a page in her notebook, she wondered if they were watching, if they were finding new reasons to mock her. The harassment continued throughout the week, growing bolder with each passing day. Chloe and Jessica seemed to have an endless supply of commentary about Maya's appearance, her habits, her obvious nervousness. "Look at her hands," Chloe said on Tuesday during lunch, not bothering to lower her voice as Maya sat alone at a corner table. "They're actually shaking. Is she having some kind of breakdown?" Maya looked down at her hands and realized Chloe was right. They were trembling as she tried to unwrap her sandwich. She quickly sat on them, but the damage was done. Several students had turned to look, and she could see the mixture of curiosity and pity in their eyes. Maybe she has some kind of disease, Jessica added helpfully. My cousin has epilepsy and she shakes like that sometimes. Or maybe she's just a freak, Chloe concluded with a laugh that seemed to echo off the cafeteria walls. Wednesday brought commentary about Maya's clothes again. She had worn jeans and a simple t-shirt, trying to blend in, but somehow Chloe found fault with that too. Did she get dressed in the dark? Chloe asked her circle of followers. Those jeans don't even fit her right. And that shirt looks like something from a thrift store. The shirt was from a thrift store. Actually, Maya's family wasn't poor, but military life meant being practical about expenses, especially when you never knew when you might have to move again. She had found the shirt at a vintage shop and loved its soft fabric and faded band logo. Now she felt foolish for thinking it was cool. Thursday's attack was more subtle, but perhaps more painful. Maya had finally worked up the courage to answer a question in English class. Her voice barely above a whisper, as she discussed the symbolism in the novel they were reading. I can't hear her, Chloe stage whispered to Jessica. Does she actually have a voice, or does she just communicate through anxiety attacks? A few students laughed, and Maya felt her face burn with shame. She didn't speak again for the rest of the class, despite knowing several more answers. But it was Friday when things escalated beyond cruel words. Maya was walking to her locker after lunch, her head down and her thoughts focused on getting through the rest of the day, when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to see Chloe approaching with her usual entourage, but there was something different in their demeanor today. They looked excited, predatory, like hunters who had finally cornered their prey. Hey new girl, Chloe called out, her voice carrying down the hallway. We need to talk. Maya's heart rate spiked instantly. Every instinct told her to run, but she was trapped between Chloe's group and a wall of lockers. Other students in the hallway began to slow down, sensing drama in the air. I need to get to class, Maya stammered, her voice barely audible. Class doesn't start for 10 minutes, Chloe said, stepping closer. We have plenty of time for a little chat. Jessica and the others formed a loose circle around Maya, not close enough to be obviously threatening, but near enough to make escape impossible. Maya felt like a deer surrounded by wolves. We've been watching you all week, Chloe continued, her voice loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear. And we're curious about something. Are you always this pathetic? Or is this a special performance just for us? Maya's hands began to shake again, and she tried to hide them behind her back. I don't know what you mean. Oh, I think you do, Chloe said, her smile sharp as a blade. You walk around here like you're afraid of your own shadow. You jump every time someone says your name. You eat lunch alone like some kind of social reject. It's actually kind of sad. The crowd around them had grown larger. Maya could see faces watching with the kind of fascination people have for car accidents, horrified but unable to look away. Some students looked uncomfortable, but none of them moved to help. Maybe she's just shy, Jessica said in a mock sympathetic voice. Maybe she needs help coming out of her shell. You're right, Chloe said, her eyes lighting up with malicious inspiration. Maybe what she needs is a little encouragement to speak up. Before Maya could react, Chloe reached out and grabbed her backpack, yanking it off her shoulders. Maya stumbled backward, her book scattering across the floor. Oops, Chloe said with exaggerated innocence. How clumsy of me. Maya dropped to her knees, frantically trying to gather her scattered belongings. Her notebook had fallen open, revealing the careful notes she had taken, the margins filled with her small, precise handwriting. Her anxiety management techniques, written in her own hand, were now exposed for everyone to see. Oh, what's this? Jessica said, snatching up the notebook before Maya could reach it. Breathing exercises. Positive self-talk. Are you some kind of mental case? Maya felt something inside her chest collapse. Those notes were private, personal, the tools she used to get through each day. Having them mocked in front of half the school felt like being stripped naked in public. Give that back, Maya said, her voice still quiet but with an edge of desperation. Please. I don't think so, Chloe said, taking the notebook from Jessica. I think everyone should hear about your little coping strategies. Maybe we can all learn something. She began to read aloud in a mocking tone. When feeling overwhelmed, count to 10 slowly. Remember that this feeling will pass. You are stronger than your anxiety." The crowd laughed, and Maya felt tears burning behind her eyes. She reached for the notebook, but Chloe held it high above her head. "What's wrong?" Chloe taunted, feeling overwhelmed. "Maybe you should count to 10. Maya stood up slowly, her scattered books forgotten. Something was happening inside her, something she hadn't felt in a long time. The familiar weight of anxiety was still there, but it was being joined by something else. Something hotter, more dangerous. "Give me my notebook," Maya said, her voice slightly louder now. "Or what?" Chloe laughed. "You'll have an anxiety attack. You'll run away and hide in the bathroom." The crowd pressed closer, cell phones appearing as students began to record what they sensed would be an epic humiliation. Maya could see herself through their eyes, small, frightened, pathetic. The weird new girl who couldn't even stand up for herself. But there was something they didn't know about Maya Chen. Something that her anxiety and quietness had hidden from view. For the past 6 years, since she was 10 years old, Maya had been studying Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It had started as a way to help with her anxiety, something her therapist had suggested to build confidence and physical strength. What began as therapy had become a passion, and what started as a way to manage her fears had turned into genuine skill. Maya had earned her blue belt 2 years ago, and she had been training consistently even through all the moves and school changes. It was one of the few constants in her life, a source of strength and identity that she carried with her wherever she went. But she had never used it outside the dojo. She had never needed to, and more importantly, she had never wanted to. The principles of jiu-jitsu emphasized control, discipline, and using force only as a last resort. Her instructors had taught her that true strength came from avoiding conflict when possible. But as she stood there, watching Chloe wave her private notebook like a trophy, while the crowd laughed at her most vulnerable moments, Maya felt something shift inside her. The anxiety was still there, but it was no longer alone. Rising up alongside it was a quiet, steady determination. "I'll ask you one more time," Maya said, her voice carrying clearly now, despite its calm tone. "Please give me my notebook." Chloe's eyes widened slightly at the change in Maya's demeanor. But she was too committed to her performance to back down now. She had an audience, a reputation to maintain, and a victim who was supposed to remain helpless. "And I'll tell you one more time," Chloe said, stepping closer and speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I don't think so. Maybe if you get on your knees and beg for it, I might consider." She never finished the sentence. Maya moved with the fluid grace of someone who had practiced the same movements thousands of times. She stepped forward, her right hand gripping Chloe's wrist while her left hand found the girl's elbow. In one smooth motion, she pivoted her hips and used Chloe's own momentum against her. The throw was a basic osotogari, an outer reaping throw that Maya had drilled countless times in the dojo. To the watching crowd, it looked like magic. One moment Chloe was standing there, confident and in control. The next moment she was airborne, her eyes wide with shock as she realized what was happening. Chloe landed hard on her back in the middle of the hallway, Maya's notebook fluttering down beside her. The impact drove the air from her lungs with a whoosh, and she lay there gasping like a fish out of water. The hallway fell completely silent. Cell phones continued to record, but their owners stood frozen in shock. No one had expected this. The quiet, anxious new girl had just thrown the school's queen bee, like she weighed nothing at all. Maya stood over Chloe, her breathing calm and controlled despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She reached down and picked up her notebook, checking to make sure the pages weren't damaged. "In jiu-jitsu," Maya said, her voice carrying clearly in the stunned silence, "we learn that strength isn't about being the loudest or the meanest. It's about knowing when to be gentle and when to be firm. It's about protecting yourself and others from harm." Chloe struggled to sit up, her face red with embarrassment and shock. She looked around at the crowd, expecting support, but found only stares and raised phones. The power dynamic had shifted completely in a matter of seconds. You can't just attack people," Chloe gasped, still trying to catch her breath. "I didn't attack you," Maya said calmly. "I defended myself. There's a difference." She tucked the notebook back into her backpack and looked around at the crowd. For the first time since arriving at Riverside High, she didn't feel small or invisible. She felt like herself. "I've been to 4 schools in 3 years," Maya continued, her voice steady and clear. I've dealt with anxiety my whole life. I know what it's like to feel scared, to feel like you don't belong, to feel like you're not strong enough to stand up for yourself. She looked directly at Chloe, who was now sitting on the floor, looking more confused than angry. But being scared doesn't mean being weak. And being quiet doesn't mean being helpless. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who choose not to use their strength until they absolutely have to. A murmur went through the crowd. Several students were nodding, and Maya noticed that some of them were looking at her with something that might have been respect. I don't want to fight with anyone, Maya said. I just want to go to school, learn, and be left alone. But if someone tries to humiliate me or hurt me, I will defend myself. That's not a threat, it's just a fact. She shouldered her backpack and began to walk away, but then she turned back to address the crowd one more time. And for anyone recording this, I hope you'll think about what you saw today. Not just the throw, but everything that led up to it. Maybe ask yourself why you thought it was entertaining to watch someone get bullied. Maybe think about what kind of person you want to be. As Maya walked down the hallway toward her next class, the crowd began to disperse. Students whispered excitedly about what they had witnessed, but there was a different quality to their conversations now. The narrative had changed completely. Chloe finally got to her feet, helped by Jessica and a few other friends. She was physically unharmed, but clearly shaken. The social power she had wielded so confidently just minutes before felt fragile now, uncertain. This isn't over, she called after Maya. But her voice lacked its usual conviction. Maya paused and turned around one more time. Yes, it is, she said simply. It's over because I say it's over. You can choose to make it something else, but then you'll have to deal with the consequences of that choice. The warning was delivered without malice, but it was unmistakable. Chloe looked into Maya's eyes and saw something that made her take an involuntary step backward. This wasn't the same frightened girl she had been tormenting all week. This was someone else entirely. Word of the incident spread through the school like wildfire. By the end of the day, everyone had heard some version of the story. In most tellings, Maya had become a mysterious martial arts expert who had been hiding her abilities behind a mask of shyness. The truth was more complex, but the legend was already taking shape. Maya's phone buzzed with friend requests and messages from classmates who had never spoken to her before. Some were genuine expressions of admiration. Others were clearly people trying to get close to someone who had suddenly become famous. She ignored most of them, but she did accept a few from students who had shown her kindness before the incident. At dinner that night, Maya's parents noticed that she seemed different, less tense, more present. Her father, Colonel Chen, had been stationed at bases all over the world, and he recognized the look of someone who had faced a challenge and emerged stronger. Good day at school? Her mother asked casually. Maya considered the question seriously. Actually, yes, I think it was a very good day. She didn't tell them about the confrontation, at least not yet. She wanted to process it herself first, to understand what had happened and what it meant for her future at Riverside High. That weekend, Maya returned to the local jiu-jitsu academy for the first time since moving to town. She had been putting it off, using her anxiety about starting at a new school as an excuse. But now she felt ready to reconnect with the practice that had given her so much strength. The instructor, a soft-spoken man named Professor Martinez, welcomed her warmly and invited her to roll with some of the other students. As they practiced together, Maya felt the familiar sense of peace that came from being in her element. This was where she belonged, where her quietness was seen as focus and her careful movements were appreciated as technique. You seem different today, Professor Martinez observed as they were cooling down. More centered. Maya nodded. I had to use what you taught me this week. Not the techniques exactly, but the principles, the confidence, the knowledge that I could handle whatever came my way. The instructor smiled. That's what this is all about. Not learning to fight, but learning that you don't have to be afraid. The physical techniques are just tools. The real transformation happens in here. He tapped his chest, over his heart. Monday morning brought a new dynamic to Riverside High. Maya walked through the hallways with her head up, making eye contact with other students instead of staring at the floor. She still felt the familiar flutter of anxiety in her stomach, but it was manageable now. contained within a larger sense of self-possession. Chloe and her friends kept their distance, but Maya could feel them watching her. There was no more mockery, no more staged conversations designed to humiliate her. The balance of power had shifted, and everyone could sense it. In biology class, Maya raised her hand to answer a question. Her voice was still quiet, but it was clear and confident. Mr. Patterson smiled and nodded approvingly at her response. At lunch, Maya was surprised to find that her usual corner table was occupied by 3 other students. They looked up nervously as she approached, as if they expected her to tell them to leave. "Is it okay if we sit here?" asked a girl named Emma, who Maya recognized from her English class. "We don't want to bother you, but..." "Of course," Maya said, settling into the remaining chair. "I'd like the company." Emma smiled with relief. "I wanted to thank you for what you did on Friday. Not just the throw, but what you said afterward. About thinking about what kind of person you want to be. That really stuck with me." The other students nodded in agreement. One of them, a boy named Marcus, spoke up. "I've been getting picked on by some older kids, and I kept thinking I just had to take it. But watching you stand up for yourself, it made me realize I don't have to be a victim." Maya felt a warmth spread through her chest. This was unexpected, the sense of connection and purpose. She had spent so much time trying to be invisible, that she had forgotten what it felt like to be seen, really seen, by other people. "I'm not saying everyone should learn martial arts," Maya said carefully, "but everyone deserves to feel safe and respected, and sometimes that means we have to advocate for ourselves." As the weeks passed, Maya found herself at the center of a different kind of attention than she had ever experienced. Students who had never noticed her before began to seek her out, not because they were afraid of her, but because they respected her. She became someone that other quiet kids could talk to, someone who understood what it felt like to be overlooked or dismissed. Maya started a small support group that met in the library during lunch, a place where students could talk about anxiety, social pressures, and strategies for building confidence. It grew slowly but steadily, attracting kids who had been struggling in silence. Chloe, meanwhile, found that her social dominance was no longer as absolute as it had once been. The video of her being thrown by the quiet new girl had gone viral within the school. And while she wasn't exactly a social pariah, her power to intimidate others had been significantly diminished. To her credit, Chloe eventually approached Maya one afternoon after school. Maya was leaving the library where she had been tutoring a younger student in math when Chloe appeared beside her locker. "Can we talk?" Chloe asked, her voice lacking its usual commanding tone. Maya studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Sure." They walked outside to a quiet spot near the school's garden, where other students were less likely to overhear them. "I wanted to apologize," Chloe said, the words coming out in a rush, "for what I did to you, for how I treated you. It was wrong, and I knew it was wrong while I was doing it, but I did it anyway." Maya waited, letting Chloe find her own words. "I guess I thought, I don't know what I thought, that it was funny, that it made me look cool. But watching that video of myself," Chloe shook her head, "I looked like a monster. I was a monster." "You were a person making bad choices," Maya said gently. "That's not the same thing as being a monster." Chloe looked up in surprise. "You're being awfully kind to someone who tried to humiliate you in front of the whole school." Maya shrugged. "Holding on to anger takes too much energy. And besides, I think you've learned your lesson." "I have," Chloe said quickly. "I really have. I've been thinking a lot about why I act the way I do, why I thought it was okay to hurt other people. I don't like the person I was." "Then be someone different," Maya said simply. "It's not too late to change." Chloe nodded, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. Would you be willing to help me? I mean, I know I don't deserve it, but I want to do better. I want to be better." Maya considered the request. Part of her wanted to say no, to let Chloe figure it out on her own. But she remembered Professor Martinez's words about the real transformation happening in the heart. And she thought about the person she wanted to be. "I'll think about it," Maya said finally. "But if we're going to work together, you have to understand that this isn't about me forgiving you so you can feel better about yourself. This is about you taking responsibility for the harm you've caused, and making amends." "I understand," Chloe said, "and Maya, thank you for not giving up on people like me." As the school year progressed, Maya watched Chloe slowly but genuinely transform herself. It wasn't easy, and there were setbacks, but Chloe began to use her social influence in positive ways. She started standing up for other students instead of tearing them down, and she became an advocate for anti-bullying initiatives within the school. Maya's own transformation was more subtle, but no less profound. She still dealt with anxiety, but she had learned to manage it in healthy ways. She still preferred quiet conversations to loud parties, but she no longer saw that as a weakness. She had found her voice, and more importantly, she had found her strength. On the last day of school, as Maya was cleaning out her locker, she found a note that had been slipped through the vents. It was from a student she barely knew, thanking her for showing him that it was possible to be both gentle and strong, both quiet and powerful. Maya smiled and tucked the note into her notebook, the same one that Chloe had tried to use to humiliate her months before. Now it was filled with new memories, new friendships, and new understanding about who she was and who she could become. As she walked out of Riverside High for the last time that year, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had started the year as a frightened new girl, desperate to remain invisible. She was ending it as someone who understood that true strength came not from avoiding conflict, but from knowing when and how to stand up for what was right. The anxiety was still there, and probably always would be, but it no longer defined her. She was Maya Chen, martial artist, student, friend, and advocate. She was exactly who she was meant to be, and she was ready for whatever came next.